and the lactation support at the hospital was lacking. Breastfeeding was just not going well. So our doula called Ann Seacrest, who's the chief executive of Milkworks, and arranged an after-hours weekend consult for us. So we didn't go straight home with our baby after our birth. We headed straight to Milkworks. And as a result of that and the great care we received, Ann is just a hero of mine. And I just can't stand that any controllable factor would hold Ann and Milkworks back from helping more families like my own. And that controllable factor that could hold them back is the quality of the relationship between the board chair and the chief executive. And so all of that kind of motivated me to start looking into the matter. And then in my research, I found that everyone was saying that this is the most important relationship a nonprofit has. Consultants, academics, not-for-profit leaders, and so forth, capacity building organizations. We're all saying this was the most important relationship, but we're offering very little in the way of how-tos. So I decided to interview a bunch of pairs of chief executives and board chairs and find out what they had to say, and thus the book.
The context, I think, is very helpful and gives us a sense of your own kind of uniquely practical kind of perspective on research that's very important, I think. Let's talk about, this is the qualitative research geek in me.
Yeah, sure.
Wanting to understand, because so much of governance research is survey and quantifiable, right. You chose a very different approach. Yep. That may or may not be obvious to those listening, but could you expand upon why you chose those kind of paired case study options?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. And I'll because I'm a recovering academic, I'll try to keep this at more a practitioner level. I know you're a practicing academic, and I appreciate that a great deal about you. But qualitative research, case study research, one of the reasons I did it is just because of my background as a newspaper journalist. I mean, it's an area of existing strength for me. I'm fairly good at interviewing people. And when I was a reporter, and then when I went on to be a political science instructor at the university level, I always had this philosophy that I ultimately shared with my students, that you shouldn't start with the Google. You should start with asking people who are likely to know if you have a question you want answered. So based on that philosophy, based on my strength in interviewing, I wanted to do the case study research. The other thing is, I think it produced rich data and rich stories that my readers can really find themselves in. I mean, there's, how many case studies are there in the book? I think 9 at this point. I mean, odds are you will find somebody like yourself in the book if you're a board chair or a chief executive who's interested in developing a great leadership partnership.
And those stories, you include those case studies as part of the book. And yeah, you're right. The richness of what they shared with you really is kind of remarkable. Was that a surprise that they were just so willing to open up to you? And
these are people I've known for quite some time. Sure. I mean, former clients, friends. Only in a couple of cases was it someone I didn't know or hadn't met who came to me on referral. So hopefully it wasn't a surprise. I mean, hopefully these folks trust me well enough to be open. I mean, I think there was a motivation on their part to really share their learnings for the benefits of their peers and colleagues elsewhere in the sector.
Sure. And you're so right. I think that anyone who reads the book and reads those case studies definitely will see elements of themselves in at least one of the pairs, and certainly you will find people, settings, and people who will remind you of someone you know. Also working in the sector. So that's one of the greatest things I think about the fact that you chose a case study, is that your stories really bring your data to life.
Thanks.
So kudos for that. I'm all about the importance of qualitative research, particularly in discussing these relationships.
Right.
Maybe go into a bit of some of your findings. I don't want to give everything away, but let's touch on some of the highlights.
Sure.
That's okay with you?
Absolutely.
Great. I think one of the more important starting points was that you identified a couple of kind of key factors. You call them prerequisites to developing a healthy partnership. And if you don't mind, would you tell us about those kind of key factors?
No, I don't mind at all. The two prerequisites are a shared mission and a vision, and a growth mindset, which you might also call abundance thinking. So just really briefly on the shared mission and vision, if you're not both in it to win it for the same thing, if you're not both striving in the same direction toward the same mission, it's going to be really difficult to build a supportive leadership partnership around achieving the mission, because that's ultimately what you're in it for. And then if one of you is a fixed mindset type of person, a scarcity thinker, it's going to be really, really difficult for the person who has a growth mindset or an abundance mindset to meet you even halfway, because your views on the world are just so radically different. Now we know from Carol Dweck's research at Stanford that, a fixed mindset is fixable, but it's probably not fixable within the 1 to 2 year term of a board chair. So if you run into just a glass half empty, zero-sum game, there's only one pie and we've got to fight for our tiny slice of it type of thinker, it's probably best to look for an alternative leadership partner. And there's some questions in the book that help you assess honestly whether you yourself have some struggles, some internal struggles with a fixed mindset or with scarcity thinking.
Sure. One of the great things about the finished product that you provide is it's very actionable.
Yes.
And you're right, you can't necessarily fix that within the time frame of a board chair term, but certainly the kinds of questions you raise can prompt some reflection that might prime the pump and get you off to a better start than maybe you would otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are kind of the essentials. If those are in place, what are kind of those next step factors that really take it from we've got to work together for a year or two and get by and keep things moving to really that kind of healthy partnership that you describe? So
in my case study work with the board chairs and chief executives that I interviewed, 3 keys came up. And so what we determined is that building a leadership partnership that makes you happy, makes your partner happy, and accomplishes great things for the mission comes down to just these 3 things. And they are: 1, build trust and transparency; 2, set clear expectations; and 3, plan frequent communication. Now, Deborah, it really is that simple. They're easy to understand keys, but I want to be realistic here. They're hard to put into practice, especially number 3. And the real challenge for the super smart, talented, high achieving people who tend to run on the staff side and govern on the board side, not-for-profit organizations, is that they are smart people and they can coast and they can wing it and they can assume that everything's going to be all right. They can neglect to put in the work and they can take for granted that they're going to have a solid partnership, maybe based on some assumptions from previous partnerships. And we don't want them to do that. We want with each relationship to plan in advance for acting on these 3 keys.
Could you expand maybe a little bit from maybe kind of highlights from the case studies of what some of these successful peers did to foster those kinds of relationships and foster, create an environment where those factors are possible?
Well, I mean, overall, they talked with each other. They planned, intentional time to discuss what I need out of the relationship, what I want to accomplish, what's my learning style, what's my communication style, how often can we talk, what will we do to support each other before and after board meetings, how will we keep our conversations strategic and interesting and not tactical and boring? You know, how do we keep our our partnership conversations between the two of us from being the same kind of transactional, putting checks on checklist type of interactions that board members kind of complain about when they say, you know, this isn't engaging enough.
Sure. What kind of kept them motivated in terms of, in terms of busy people, time factor, what kind of things help keep them motivated over the long haul?
Well, a common, passionate devotion to the mission, and maybe a desire not to go it alone. One thing to realize is that it's lonely at the top for both the chief executive and the board chair. Both of them lead a group of people, but they have no direct peer. Okay. The board chair doesn't have a peer. The chief executive doesn't have a peer, but they can have each other in a mutually supportive leadership partnership. Sure.
For the CEO, I would imagine one of the challenges is that for the CEO, these relationships are kind of transient, inevitably.
Yes.
Did the CEOs give you any insight into how they kind of keep the momentum going as the volunteer leadership changes?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, in the book, I recommend making some really substantial investments in building a relationship with a person who's going to be term limited out in just the blink of an eye.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna spend all this time developing this relationship with the person, and they're not going to be your board chair for very darn long. How they keep the momentum going is in part not the chief executive's responsibility, but it's the board chair's responsibility. Because ideally, the board chair is building a culture of leadership, partnership, to set the stage for the vice chair or the chair-elect to have that great kind of leadership partnership with the chief executive when the current board chair steps down because of term limits.
Could we expand upon that? Because I have a feeling that that's not always at the forefront of many board chairs' minds as they head into their term of service. Like, how do we get board chairs thinking about kind of leadership succession, all sort of,
sure.
Building something upon which their successor can expand?
So here's how we do it. We build it into a strategic conversation calendar that we agree to as board chair and chief executive. We've got, say, 10 major conversations that we're going to have over the course of the year, and we make board chair succession one of those conversation topics. The other thing that we do is we put CEO succession and CEO evaluation just on the calendar right now at the start of the year. So it just automatically comes up. Those inconvenient topics that everybody wants to forget about or skip, we just put it on the calendar, and we know that in September, we're going to be talking about the CEO evaluation. In October, we're going to talk CEO succession. And in November, we're going to talk board chair succession. So that way it's just built in, and, it's not like I'm bringing it up or you're bringing it up. We can just blame it on the conversation calendar.
See, that's a healthy way to work with structure.
Yeah.
Structure of a board. I love that. Let's expand a bit upon, you mentioned strategic conversations. Can we talk a little bit more about what those look like, particularly for those successful board pairs you interviewed?
Yeah. So it's it's the end of the year fundraising season. I imagine people are going to galas and fundraising events and everything. So I want you to think of the chocolate fountain at the gala. The actual like rivers of chocolate flowing down from the tiers and everything, and you stick the little marshmallow or the pound cake or the banana in there. Okay, so think of that. Well, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting strategic thinking, high quality conversations about strategy to be flowing down from the top tier of that chocolate fountain, which is the conversation between the board chair and the chief executive. And then that moves down from the chief executive to her leadership team and from the board chair to her peers at the board level. And so conversations on strategic, important but not urgent topics, non-transactional stuff, the culture and practice of starting with those discussions and having really deep and meaningful generative thinking about them, it starts with the board chair and the chief executive. I went off talking about chocolate fountains because it's close to lunchtime and I'm hungry. Did I actually answer your question in all that?
No, absolutely. I think it's a great metaphor. That's a great metaphor. It's rather than isolated little tasks, and it really is a kind of a natural process that flows. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and if I might add, your communications director or your marketing director at your not-for-profit should attach to this idea easily, because this is essentially a content calendar for your social media efforts and everything. Most organizations work from a content calendar. So if, for instance, they're a NeighborWorks organization, they don't get to NeighborWorks Week, which happens every year at the same time, and discover like the Monday of NeighborWorks Week that they didn't generate any content to share, on their blog and on their social channels. So this strategic conversations calendar is much like a content calendar. It puts all the topics you've agreed that you need to talk about onto the calendar so you don't miss them. And also importantly, for the less convenient, sort of less comfortable topics, you don't skip them. Because again, it's not me bringing it up. It's not you bringing it up. It's not some like irritating board member who's always bringing up, topic X. It's nobody's fault. It's the conversation calendar's fault.
Absolutely. I love the conversation calendar in that, like you said, it keeps us focused on the things that must be done and that need to happen, regardless of whether it's a comfortable thing to do. But also, Again, the fountain, maybe it's because it's towards lunchtime here and I'm hungry. It's treating that strategic thinking and the strategic discussion as an ongoing process, rather than let's cram it into 4 hours on a Saturday morning at a retreat somewhere. There really is kind of a natural kind of progression for it. For me, just thinking as a board chair, that could be that process, and that expectation can be both a little bit scary initially, but also very exciting, because that's where the real meat of governance work really lies, in those kinds of strategic discussions and that strategic process. Did you find that board chairs, did that feel natural for them, or were there some who maybe had to kind of build up their strategic muscles to feel comfortable doing that work with the CEO?
I don't think we went into that level of detail about how comfortable the board chairs felt in their role and how prepared they felt. I think there's other research that you and our friends have done about board preparation for governance work. I guess I would say, in regard to any discomfort or lack of preparation, remember that the support goes both ways. Ideally, you would be establishing a trusting and transparent relationship with clear expectations, and you'd be communicating frequently. And contained within those conversations would be open, honest, and vulnerable admissions that, hey, I need help in my role as board chair. Or on the other side, hey, I need help in my role as chief executive.
Sure. And that strikes me as a prompt to revisit one of your keys. Let's talk a bit more about the notion of clear expectations on both sides.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So
that's sometimes easier said than done, I found.
Yeah, we're not talking about task lists. Apologies to governance book authors, but we're not talking about some, strict adherence to some set of rules or guidelines that's in a governance textbook. We're talking about two professionals who trust each other, who are dividing up the work in a way that makes sense for them, using their unique blend of talents and strengths. We're talking about high-level expectations. A lot of the expectations come, an easy thing to start talking about is how will we debrief after a board meeting, okay? How will we support each other? Everyone on the call, everyone who's worked in either a board or staff role at a not-for-profit has seen a board member at a board meeting bring up some out of left field question, okay? And maybe it involves a staff member, maybe it involves a staff member who's in the room. So when you've had this conversation in advance about issues that we expect to come up at the board meeting, and when the board chair is kind of listening closely for some of the concerns and interest of his peers or her peers on the board, the chair in this out of left field question kind of sense can say to the CEO, would you like to address this question now? Or would you rather come back to us with an answer later? And see, what this builds on is the trust that the board has in the chair. They know and they can see visible evidence that the chair and the chief executive have been talking. They're on the same page, and they can trust that the chair has talked this over with the chief executive, and in the chair's judgment, we can leave it up to the chief executive about whether to address this or pause it and hold off for another time.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for expanding upon that. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
You have that clarity in this partnership. Yeah. Let's talk about dysfunction.
Sure.
You identified some factors that foster that and may be familiar to some of our viewers.
Yes. Factor number one, just being a jerk. I mean, there's a story in the book about my children's zoo CEO, John Chapo, here in Lincoln, Nebraska, who had the micromanaging board chair from hell, who said just nasty things to John's face and said, I've fired others and I can fire you. And John just said that this kind of paralyzed him, second guessing every decision he made, everything he said resulted in nothing being accomplished for the mission. So just when you're dealing with an absolute jerk, that can lead to dysfunction. And there's ways to control for that, right? Ideally, if you have a very slow, intentional recruitment process, you can weed out a lot of the jerks. And if your board takes executive committee succession seriously, you can further weed out the jerks. And if the executive committee or however your board runs it takes board chair succession seriously, you can further weed out the jerks. And my gosh, if one rises to the top by then, I don't know what I can do for you. It's beyond the help of this book. Some other factors are lack of openness, just openness to change, openness to learning, openness to different ways of looking at the world. People who have stopped growing, people who have stopped developing, those folks are going to contribute to dysfunctional relationships. And then, the best people, the most highly accomplished, smart, talented, kind, generous, considerate folks, who are high achievers, like I indicated earlier, they can assume. They can go on assumptions that the way I've worked with this board chair will work for working with the next board chair. And so that lack of intentionality and that going on assumptions can cause trouble.
I think I've seen that a time or two myself along the way. Yes, yes. It's so striking that what you're talking about with such high impact potential really is at the heart basic 101 kind of human relationship work.
Yes.
That was just something that it makes such great intuitive sense. And I think that one of the things that you do, your work does, is provide a context and a reminder that this is important. This is a relationship we're talking about.
Yes.
This really is a relationship. So I think that, as you said, so much of that exists out there for governing bodies, focus on roles and responsibilities and tasks and how to create the greatest meeting ever. But at the bottom, at the core of this all really is about relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a fourth key. We talked about 3 keys to a successful partnership, but keep reading. There's a fourth.
It's the super secret fourth key. Let me tell you a story behind it. So back when I was in junior high, I attended a church youth group, and we went on a week-long retreat, to far away, and brought in a guest speaker. And the guest speaker spoke the entire week from the Velveteen Rabbit. So all his messages were about being real and about being authentic and genuine. And that has just been kind of something that I try to make a defining quality of my life ever since, is being real and genuine and authentic. And if you don't mind, I'll just read a quotation from the book, which I happen to have right here in front of me, about the Velveteen Rabbit and being real. I should have had the page marked, which I did not. I'm almost there. Here we go. Okay, so this is from the Velveteen Rabbit. "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up?" he asked, "or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the Skin Horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand."
Very powerful. Very powerful. So let's talk about what that looks like in a board chair CEO relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that fourth key really spins back to the first one of building trust and transparency. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are familiar with Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and how he says that building trust is the foundation of a healthy team. And when he's talking about trust, he doesn't mean trust in like the transactional sense, like I've seen you do A well before, so I trust that you're going to continue to do A well. No, he means vulnerability-based trust, where I really know you and what motivates you and where you're coming from. And you've told me a little something about yourself. In other words, you've been real. You've been genuine and authentic, and you haven't worried about looking a little shabby to your leadership partner.
Very powerful. Thank you for that. Before we move on to how to go about accessing your work, it's the holiday season, and we're all attending parties and interactions, and you've probably had this conversation many times before. I'm a board chair, wanting to make the most of my experience and my work with CEO, and I'm going to buy your book, and I'm going to listen to this interview. But in the moment, standing over the eggnog, I want like one kind of key piece of advice, to help get that started. What would that key piece of advice be?
Well, talk to your chief executive as soon as you can, and ask her or ask him, what's the one thing that you really want to accomplish during my term as board chair that would make this term a real success for both of us? What's that one boulder you can imagine the two of us pushing together with our unique combination of talents and strengths? Something we can only do together, and something that we can accomplish in the next 1 to 2 years. No term extension cheating allowed. It's got to be in the next 1 to 2 years. What boulder can we move together? And that was several questions, but let's call that question 1. And question number 2 is, how can I help?
Very cool. Thank you. I'm at that same punch bowl. I'm an ED, a little burned in the past by some less than high impact relationships with board chairs.
Sure.
We won't say what factors might have led to that, but I'm a little hesitant. I also I'm ordering your book and will be watching this interview, but I'm staying at the punch bowl. I'm a little skeptical, maybe a little more skeptical than my board chair friend here. What piece of advice would you give that person?
Okay. Take a piece of fruitcake off of the banquet table. Take a pointy utensil. Okay. And make some sort of mark on it that signifies all your past disappointing relationships. Eat the fruitcake quickly. To signify that it's all gone. You got to do it quickly because, I mean, God, it's fruitcake. It's going to taste nasty. Wash it down with some tasty, tasty eggnog, and then ask those same 2 questions of your board chair that I just recommended your board chair ask of you, although, obviously switch the names around.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's talk about this particular book. You were a multi-book author, but this particular book, you took such an interesting approach. And I'm wondering if you might, first off, share with listeners kind of what the options are, what the package looks like in terms of being able to access this expertise and this knowledge.
Sure. Well, you can purchase the book from my website in 3 packages at bettertogetherleadership.com. And on there, you can get the ebook, which is just the book itself. This is kind of the why relationships matter and sort of at a high level how to go about improving them. Package 2 is the book plus the audiobook, so that my dulcet tones can lull you to sleep, or that so you can work on your leadership partnership while you're exercising, commuting, that sort of thing. Package 3 includes the companion workbook, which includes, it's kind of like a self-coaching guide. It contains all sorts of coaching questions that you can ask yourself. Of course, as you might imagine, it's better done together, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, with your board chair. And those strategic conversations that I talked about earlier that start with your board chair and flow down with the ooey gooey chocolatey goodness down to the board and the leadership team, there's 3 sections worth of strategic conversation starters. So even if you only buy the book to improve the strategic thinking qualities of your leadership team meetings and your board meetings, it'll be a win for you. So those are available at bettertogetherleadership.com. If you prefer a print version, you can get it at Amazon.
I'm glad that you reminded me about that print option. I took the package 3, and I'm so glad that I did, because yes, I do read the electronic version often. Yes, I have listened to your dulcet tones more than once. And for me,
and you're awake. This is amazing.
and for me, I'm not one who I really have to focus with audio, but certainly that additional kind of opportunity to reinforce has just been really very valuable. And then for me, I think I've shared with you in another setting, that workbook. I actually had to print it out because really important things, I need a hard copy.
Uh-huh.
And I found myself wanting to refer back to this incredibly practical resource that you provide, that really is just a phenomenal kind of service.
I just got to break in here, Deborah, and remind you that you know the author personally. You could just ask him to send you an autographed copy.
I may do that because
I could autograph this one right now.
I'm finding, that in terms of the book, that I really, there are some books that I just have to mark up, and I'm finding myself that this is one that, even though I get pleasure out of reading electronic copy, it's one I need to really mark up. So if I don't twist your arm out of that into that copy, I'll go to Amazon just darn order one, because I really need that, because it's that valuable resource. And in terms of that product, it's research informed, research driven, but it also has that incredibly practical focus. That's something that I really appreciate, because there's not a lot of that out there that combines the two. So I'm very grateful.
Sure.
We have a lot of things that tell you how to do it, but don't have no background, research informed background, and we have a lot of theory, but very little that combines the two, and you do that marvelously.
Yeah.
One more time, let's remind our viewers of the options for accessing and purchasing any or all of the versions of Better Together.
Yeah. So an option, obviously, I and my beautiful daughters would love it if you bought it. At bettertogetherleadership.com, though, I've got an offer to get the book sent to you free in 9 serialized emails. So I think about a week apart over 9 weeks, you'll get the book in little digestible chunks. It'll take you like 15 to 20 minutes to read, and will include reflection questions directly tied to what you read in that particular email. So you can subscribe to that and get the book dripped out to you over the next few weeks if you'd like. And then you can get the ebook and get the ebook plus audiobook, or the ebook, audiobook, and companion workbook, all at bettertogetherleadership.com. Once again, if you like the Dead Tree version, it's at Amazon.
Well, one of the advantages of the Dead Tree version is you can pass that down to your successor, your board chair successor. Sure. So
yeah.
Not that we wouldn't love to, encourage another electronic purchase, but you give them options, and I like that. So thank you for that. And finally, how do we contact you if we're interested in your services or more information about your work?
The place I really like to send people to right now is LinkedIn. So just go to LinkedIn and search for John M. Fulwider, Fulwider. You're not going to have trouble finding me. There's not a whole lot of Fulwiders. There is a John Fulwider who's an attorney, I think, in Indiana. That's not me. I'm the political scientist, recovering academic, not the lawyer. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is, of course, really easy from Blab. I mean, my Twitter handle is sitting right over the top of my forehead right now, So those are the best ways to reach me, and all my contact information is all over those channels. So you can give me a call, write me an email, send me a carrier pigeon, although warning. That's kind of slow, and I can't guarantee a quick response to that latter method.
Thank you, John. I sure appreciate your willingness to come on and to be subjected to my silly questions, but also for your willingness to share your expertise and your knowledge with both people watching today and those who will find a YouTube version later on and have a chance to enjoy and learn from it. So thank you very much. For those who are interested in watching recording, I will be posting a YouTube version on my blog, boardlearning.org, later today. And so you'll have it there available for watching again and sharing with your favorite board chair and CEO. So thank you very much. I sure appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.